You?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Kathy, the first question, you've been active in water parks, environmental issues for many years. What got you involved in these issues?
Actually, it really stemmed from the opportunity Tom had to do a documentary for the National Park Service. He and I had worked together on different things in the city of St. Paul, and I didn't really have any background, but he was looking for someone who would be a good researcher and help him organize the documentary, and that's how we got started.
When did your focus turn to the Mississippi River?
I'd say it was probably as soon as I started doing the trips with Tom up and down the river, as we went from one end to the other of what's now, MNRA, looking at possibilities for the documentary. I really had my eyes open, and I'm a St. Paul kid. I just never appreciated the river. I just never got on the river. And I think that would have been in about 91, 92 when we were doing most of the work on the filming.
I know that I lived close to the Mississippi River when I was a kid, and all I remember was like when I was in third grade, my parents said, stay away from it, you can't go in it, it's too dirty. And so everybody kind of turned their back to the river. When do you recall people started turning around and looking at the river again?
Probably when we were discussing the Critical Areas Act way back when in the legislature. But I remember Tom used to talk about this when we would go to different events, and he'd say, people wanted to be able to fish, and they thought they should be able to swim, and they wondered what happened to the kingfishers, and all these signs of decline. And it seemed as though maybe he was a little bit ahead of his time, but it seemed like there was a readiness for people to reclaim the river.
I'm going to do a clap once to get my soundtracks lined up. I should have done it at the beginning, but this will work fine. Okay, sorry, Kat. It generally takes a dedicated core of people to make things happen. So when you think of MNRA and its origins, what was that core that ultimately envisioned and worked towards the creation of MNRA?
When I talk to people about the history of this, I say, we had a Congress that worked, in a real bipartisan manner, and we could never give, if Tom were here, he'd say the same thing. We could never give enough credit to Bruce Vento and to Dave Dernberger. But there were all these other people, like Peter Gove and people who'd been talking about this for a long time, maybe not having quite the same vision that Tom Kelly did, but knowing that what we had here was pretty darn special. And I think for Tom, he didn't need a lot of people, he just needed some key people who were really willing to take this on and say, we're going to do something special to protect this river for the public forever.
And so that's how it started. It's interesting, this particular park, MNRA, when you think of the properties owned and operated by the National Park Service, it's a vast array: Yellowstone, Glacier, battlefields like Gettysburg, Bull Run, even the White House is a national park. But even given that variety, this particular park is in many ways different than almost any other park. So could you comment on that?
Well, I've been to all of the aforementioned places that you were just talking about, to a lot of national parks. But what strikes me about this, especially someone who's fortunate enough to live on the river and who lived on the houseboat on the river for a long time, is the access. The fact that it's kind of omnipresent for such a long ways, and it's so accessible, especially for people who can just walk or drive or bike and get there in no time and use it in a variety of different ways. It's so incredibly accessible. And the other thing, of course, that's nice is it's beautiful simplicity. We don't need a lot of courses in geology and this, that, and the other thing, although it helps you appreciate the river, but it's so easy to like and to enjoy.
So we all know that Tom Kelly was one of the original advocates for creating this new park. What can you tell us about the earliest conversations or conceptions of turning the 72-mile stretch into a park?
Well, I think Tom knew there was some initial work that really needed to be done. And he wanted it to be a park that was clean and usable, and as I said before, fishable and swimmable and boatable. And so people needed to first understand that we had let the river go, and we really needed to do something about that before it would be worthy of status like national park status. But I think having gotten that conversation going, it wasn't long before he could look around and see that if we didn't start taking some actions, we weren't going to have the public access and protection that we needed because of development. People would say, oh, great, what a good place to develop and do this and do that. And so he was kind of working on a couple of fronts at the same time. And it was really important to him that people saw early on that we were going to need communities and people in local government up and down the whole stretch to say, yeah, maybe there's a greater good here. Maybe we have to think bigger than our own local planning and so forth. And so I would say he had kind of a dual approach from the beginning, and one that obviously worked.
Tom and Bruce Vento were friends?
Yes, they were both kids from the East Side.
Uh-huh. And was it Tom that got Bruce? Wait till that noise goes by. But I'm going to ask you about it. Was it Tom that encouraged Bruce Vento to charge up the hill and create this park?
I don't know, but I do know we had an incredible piece of good fortune in that Bruce was on the Parks Interior Committee in the House, and Tom was never shy about speaking up to power and saying, we need you on this. Other than that, I really don't know. I don't know. I mean, I saw Bruce and Susan on a lot of occasions, but we never talked about it. I really don't know more than that.
So, was it really Tom's idea to create a national park?
Oh, Tom would never say that. Tom would say there were a lot of us who just concluded this was the best way to protect the river. But he did speak the vision, I think more so than other people, and so he's come to be identified. As Bruce says, we have a picture in the hallway here of Tom and Bruce going through the lock and dam, and the way Bruce signed the picture was to Tom, the godfather of MNRA. And I think that speaks well to Tom's being identified as being the moving force.
That's what we've heard too. So Vento and Tom Kelly were early proponents. Can you remember others who joined in to that chorus?
The person who always comes to mind more than anybody is Peter Gove. And I think that was really ideal. If you can get some partnership going early on between the public and the private sector, especially people who are successful and effective, you can get a lot more done than if you're just pushing it from one direction or the other.
You already talked a little bit about the political climate that made it possible. Do you have any more thoughts about that, how today is different than back then? I mean, one of the lead environmentalists in the 1970s in the legislature was a Republican named Bob Dunn. Mm-hmm. You don't see that today very much. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think sometimes about Tom's strategy of just using the houseboat, getting those commissioners, city council members, whether it was Dakota County or Anoka or everybody in between, get people in an environment, and I just don't mean the physical environment of the river, but get people in an environment on the boat where all they needed to do was just take in the sights and talk about what was possible and recognize that we had something that was truly unique on the whole, 2,300 miles, and we needed to take some responsibility for it. And I remember even long after MNRA was law and we had the national park status, if Tom would run into a commissioner, I remember one woman in particular from Dakota County who had not ever been on the river, and he'd say, well, we're going to remedy that. We're going to get you on my boat. Because people didn't feel a hard sell. I think the river sold itself.
You don't remember the name of that commissioner, do you?
I don't. I can picture her, but I don't remember her name.
Yeah, it'd be fun to talk to her today. You've covered a little bit about this before too, but I'd like to take a second take on it, and that is the primary arguments used to justify the creation of the park.
that it needed to be repaired and then protected, and above all, accessible, which means a certain amount of constraint and restraint in terms of development. And that, particularly here on the gorge where we are right now, if there was any one talking point that I've heard Tom use over the years, whether people came from Japan or Latin America or whoever we happen to have on the boat, it was the gorge. The gorge is profoundly impressive in that we have this most unique feature, not to be seen anywhere else. And how could you not want to keep it this way in the middle of this big metropolitan area, this really, really special stretch of the river? It was really powerful with people. Their reactions were universally amazement that they could be down on the boat and not see a building or hear a car. It was just profound. It was just really nice to see people get excited and say, you're right.
What do you think's happened to the water quality since 1988?
We believe it's better. I mean, when we do get reports, we think it's better, and hopefully will continue to be so. And there's a whole lot of history, as you know, going way back to Wisconsin suing Minnesota and all this kind of thing, so we won't get into that. But boy, the life that I see on the river is amazing. I see a different kind of life from when we lived on the houseboat downtown and people were fishing. And the little kids might wade in a little bit in the area around our marina. But, you know, now when I see the kayaks of all colors come through, the Wilderness Inquiry canoes come through, and I see all these people on the river. And of course, here we have them 5 in the morning, you know, the people who are the serious rowers come by, and I'm up on the balcony so I can see them. I think people think they're in a really clean, safe river. No worries.
That's pretty remarkable, considering what it was like back
Yes.
when I was a kid. Kathy, who were the biggest champions for the creation of the park in Washington, D.C.?
You mean other than Bruce and
Well, just
Dave?
pretend I've not asked you that before, just say.
I see, excuse me. Well, of course, we had 2 remarkable people in the Congress just when we needed them. Dave Durnberger was on appropriations in the Senate, and Bruce Vento was on the House Interior Committee. Couldn't have been more fortuitous, just the right combination. And then good staff work, certainly, in their offices. They made it happen.
So do you know anything about the political strategy that what came into play in Minnesota? You talk a little bit about how Tom had the riverboat ride strategy. What do you know?
You know, I don't know, but what I would assume had happened was, you know, once you make sure that you're not going to have resistance from these 20-some municipalities and the counties and all of this up and down the river, once you've dealt with that, and people like Bruce and Dave didn't have to worry about all this pushback, it should have been a fairly doable thing for Minnesota. But I really don't know about the strategy because I wouldn't have been privy to it. Surely would.
Was there a lot of pushback from communities and landowners?
Initially, you know, I remember Tom would say, you know, the federal government, the big bugaboo, we were going to have this layer of bureaucracy we were going to have to deal with, and this was a genuine concern for a lot of people and for everybody. For those of us who work in government, we know this is a reality. And so there had to be a lot of assurances that a balance would be struck. You'll still do your own land use planning, but we're going to have some larger goal in mind here.
Do you remember anything about it? That you've touched on some of the opponents. Were most of the opponents landowners and local units of government?
I think I have to be careful how I say this, but in meeting people who were involved in the documentary Tom did, I know that ag people who'd been farmers, like 3 generations of farmers in Anoka, were kind of used to doing things their own way, but I would never want to generalize and say that any one group was more difficult to deal with than anybody else.
Given the rich history of the Mississippi River and its vital role in the history of the country and its economy, One wonders why it took 200 years to create a park solely honoring the Mississippi River. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I think about what George Latimer said, and both George and Whitney spoke at Tom's Celebration of Life. There were two mayors that day who said nobody knew what Kelly was talking about. I mean, you know, Mayor Cohen and Mayor Latimer, nobody knew what this man was talking about. We were like ships passing in the night. I mean, what do you mean a river can be here in the Twin Cities? What? Nobody got it. He had kind of a singular vision there for a while, I think, until it took hold.
Looking back on that time, how do you think things have worked out with MNRA? Did it achieve its early vision?
I do, and I think part of that has been not only did the community warm to the idea once they discovered, oh my gosh, we're living in a national park, but we had such good national park staff. I mean, the first superintendent and then the second superintendent, I think we had people who came up with a lot of marvelous ideas. Like, for instance, biking with a ranger along the river. There's so many ways that people have come forward to figure out how we can get people of all ages close to the river. It could be Community Ed in St. Paul, for instance, using those big Wilderness Inquiry canoes for senior citizens. I've seen them on the river, I've seen them come in, you know, and bring the canoes in at Hidden Falls, and I think, wow. And Friends of the Mississippi used to do these unbelievably large canoe events in the summer, you know, and I would take people and there'd be hundreds and hundreds of us coming down the river. People who didn't have the luxury of living on a houseboat like I did, or maybe never got up on one of the excursion boats on the deck, but they could get on the river, and word spreads.
Are there ways that the park as it is today are different than you and Tom and others expected?
I think Tom would, at the risk of getting a little political, but I think Tom would be a little bit disappointed in some of the recent development and in the arguments we're having right now about new buildings, what's an appropriate height. Have we gotten to the point where it's okay to scale back a little bit on the protections, the rules that were in place? And, you know, there certainly is a contingent. I know because I testified at one huge public hearing last summer. There are people, including people who work in government, who work, say, for the DNR, who think maybe we could back off a little bit. And then there are those of us who think we shouldn't give an inch. We shouldn't do anything that might spoil the river. And I see some things happening that I think are undesirable. They're maybe a little tacky. The river shore could be a little bit nicer. It could have been left in a different way. I don't think we have to be at odds with economic development, but I think it has to be done with more care.
You know, we had these far-seeing people that created this park that are, you know, not able to, for various reasons, continue to carry the sword. The torch has kind of been passed to a new generation. Do you see people stepping up to the plate and fighting these efforts to weaken the environmental protections? Are you comfortable with the kind of advocacy you're seeing?
Well, I do see some younger people. I think there are people. I'm a past president of Friends of Parks and Trails and have been involved in a lot of nonprofits, and I tend to take the outlook that people are vested and they're buying into this, and there may be some different approaches than we used in our day, but I think that people are willing to stand up and say, wait a minute, let's just think about this. Maybe they don't have kids and grandkids like I do, but they know that we have a responsibility to the next couple of generations, and this is our community and this is our river, and we really need to take care of it. Long-term thinking.
You've spent a lot of time on the river, so could you tell us what your favorite spots are?
because it was so easy for us to do this, we could take the boat upriver or downriver and not have to go very far and find an isolated bank, an anchor, and just go back to our slip in the marina the next day and feel like we'd been on vacation. One particular spot that we really liked was downriver, not too far from St. Paul Park. There was a little bay that I don't think anybody ever moored in except us. And it's nice because there you see the river markedly changing. The bluffs, the cliffs, not here where they're green, but the rocks are fabulous. That was a favorite. We did that one a lot, and we took people down there so that they would not just have the impression, if they lived up here, that it's green and lush and, you know, like we see in the gorge. We wanted them to see, no, the Mississippi has many different faces. I think the trips downriver were a real treat. The other thing, though, that I found when we would bring people, especially people who were visiting from other countries or other states, the other thing that was always enormously popular was to have them come through the lock and dam. Because we like to impress on people this is a working river and this is what it means to have a working river. You need hydropower, you know, and you need to get people through the lock and dam. And we had a lot of really delightful experiences just bringing people through the lock and dam, and we would only come up this far, and then we could turn around and take them back downtown St. Paul, and they would feel like they had really seen the river, really experienced the river.
What do you see as the greatest threats to the park and the river today?
Well, they're probably of two kinds. I'm very concerned about currently proposed development, but I'm also a little bit concerned that we get complacent. We're not maybe overtly doing anything, but we just kind of get complacent. And so when we're in a period of time like now, when the legislature has worked the last couple of years on revising the rules, people don't necessarily get involved or engaged or fired up. Not necessarily, because they think we're in a good place right now, and complacency would be the worst possible thing.
Well, you've so far done one heck of a job answering these questions. Whitney, Tom, what have I left out?
Kathy, I know you and Tom lived on the river for many years, 6 months
Yeah.
out of the year.
Yeah.
Can you just
And then
tell us?
answer it to me when you're
I would like to.
Can you tell us what was special about
Yeah, I love to talk about what it was like on a houseboat, although I must say many, many times people would spend time with us on the houseboat and they'd say, oh, we really want to do this. We want to buy a boat. And Tom would say, I will loan you my boat for the week. Because living on a houseboat is really kind of challenging in ways that people don't think about. You know, I remember the first time we had to empty the head. And I thought, my, this is odd, smelly business. You know, I mean, you don't realize that you're taking everything with you, and you have to, at some point, you have to deal with that. And there would be odd things that would happen with the boat, and Tom would crawl down in the belly of the boat, and I would be behind him, passing him the tools, because you had to work on your stomach. I mean, it was not always fun, but it was always interesting. And we took great care to not leave an impact in the sense that we only had 2 small outboard motors on our first boat, which was like this floating barge. Then on the boat that Tom built, we only had 1 small outboard motor, the amphibious boat that he built that we lived on for a while. And so we were probably the quietest boat on the river, never left a wake, never disturbed anybody. I remember a couple of times actually rescuing canoers who got out and got over their head, and we would tie them up and they would marvel at this funny little boat that we were on. You know, how could you be living on this? But it was actually pretty comfortable. It was simple life at its most basic level, absolutely. I mean, you didn't want to be a culinary queen and think you were going to do great things in the kitchen, because it wasn't going to happen. And, you know, no TV, none of that kind of thing. It was such a quiet, simple lifestyle. And when I was still working, when we were in the little marina, I would go out in the morning and feed the ducks and the geese, who sort of knew I was coming, get those 2 cups of coffee in, and then walk in Lilydale. All that done before I'd cross over the Wabasha Bridge and go to City Hall. Now, think about starting your day like that, and then knowing at the end of the day, I'd leave my office, which used to be Tom's office, I'd leave my office on City Hall, walk across the Wabasha Bridge, and 15 minutes later I'd be on the deck of the Turtle, which was the name of the boat because it was amphibious. And it was just the best possible lifestyle. And the way that we could introduce people to that, whether they were grandkids or neighbors or friends or other political people, people from foreign countries, I thought we are so lucky to be able to enjoy this and to share it. We're just so fortunate. Yeah, those were really, really good years.
Kathy, you continue to live on the river. You're just
Yes.
steps from the gorge. How do you enjoy the park today?
This is for me the best place I could be at this time of life because people love to come here. I have so much company. And sometimes it gets almost kind of crazy. I had 10 people from church for dinner recently, and we all hear the stories about how college kids will pack a deck and the deck will fall down and people get hurt. I had 10 people from my church on the balcony, and they wouldn't come in. And I said, you know, there's a perfectly good view of the river and you can see the Minneapolis skyline from all my windows. No, they wanted to be on the balcony. They were like kids. They were like kids. And my grandchildren who are out in the burbs think that when they come to Grandma's and stay over, it's a field trip just to go out on the balcony and see the stars and see the working boats. What they get a kick out of is when the barges come through, and a towboat could be taking whatever we guess about is it cement, is it grain, or what's on the boat. And for so many people, it's such a treat. And I have this treat every day. There's, you know, from early spring till fall, there's not a morning that I'm not out there in the dark before sunrise with my coffee, and a lot of times at night we go out there and we sit, and the birds are going all the time, and the eagles fly by, and sometimes I'll see an eagle fishing, or the other day I saw an eagle grab a seagull. And, you know, the fact that we're on the flyway, this is magnificent, and it never gets old. Never gets old. We have an eagle's nest about 3 blocks from here, and I can walk down there and see the mom and the dad. They're bringing something in to feed the little eaglets. You know, and this is just incredible. We're in the city, and we have this magnificent experience all the time. I just think I am so fortunate, and most of the people I know who live on the river feel that way too. I just wish, without building big buildings, I wish we could make it possible for more people. I feel really strongly about the Ford plant, which is next door, being an opportunity for people of all means and maybe modest housing to get a chance to have this experience.
Very good. Whitney, what do you have?
I'd like to go back a little bit to Tom, if we could. And I know some of this history, but if you could talk a little bit about Tom's history with the river and when
Yeah.
he came back from the war and
The way it started.
yeah.
Tom had not had any opportunities, you know, to do anything on the river. He was just a poor kid from Payne Avenue, like me. We lived very close together, we found out later. But when he came back from the Navy, from Pearl Harbor in '47, he bought what he described to me as a derelict little boat somewhere down near Spring Lake Park. He took me down to show me one day, derelict little boat. But that was when he found out that he knew how to fix things and build things. And he really spent a lot of time on that boat until he was further along and had gotten back in school and gotten his degrees and eventually gone on to leave and then come back and work in politics here. And then he got a couple of really interesting ideas. One was that he could live on a boat, but then also that, you know, we should be thinking about bringing some of this land into public ownership. That was a big deal for him. And when he got his first idea that I'm going to go to the legislature was Battle Creek. Although the park that he was the most fond of, not just because that's where the houseboat was, but the park that he thought had the most potential was Harriet Island, Lilydale. He said this could be one of the finest parks in the nation. Because where do you have a park like this in the middle of a city, or between two cities? I know that Tom was influenced by the Jamaica Bay experience New York City had. And on one of our trips out there, he showed me what had made him start thinking that it was appropriate in city and county government to acquire space like this and water for your citizens. And I think that stayed with him for a long time too. But anyway, once he got started with the Parks and Open Space program, then I think things really took off up and down the river, you know, because other local units of government could see the benefits of this and maybe the urgency. Buy some property, hold it, keep it for perpetuity.
Well, Kathy, what do you think can you talk a little bit more about his connection to the river? What did the river mean to him? What did it do for him?
Well, you know, Tom was a really deep thinker, and after he died, and I realized how much writing he had done while he was on the water, not necessarily just here on the river, but, you know, he sailed, he was a solo sailor. He was comfortable alone on the water, did a lot of sailing through the Great Lakes and down the Atlantic, and he was in love with the water. I mean, there's no getting around it. Just give him a boat, put a boat under him, and he was really happy. But he did write a lot, and I think he was a fairly poetic writer. He would smell things and see things and capture them in his writing. He left many, many logs over the years and just never had the time. Time ran out before he could get things published. And I remember after he died, a number of people said, "You're going to get Tom's papers published, aren't you?" And I said, "I think that's too big a task for me." But I think he was so at home. If he had people on the boat, better yet. But if he didn't, that was fine.
Many people, though, like Tom, love the river and love to enjoy it,
Yeah.
and love to spend time on it. But Tom actually took time away
Oh yeah.
from spending time on the river in order to advocate for protecting the river for everyone and for future generations. Can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this was a big, you know, building support for the river originally was a really, really big deal. I mean, he worked constantly, every opportunity he would have to talk to people, to get them on a boat, anything he could do to get them to try to share the vision, which, you know, as I've related, sometimes was hard to get people to share. But Tom had a wonderful saying that I think I've kind of inculcated into my political life too, which is timing is everything. And he knew that this was going to be a long slog. He knew that, and he never ran out of patience. Never, never. He just knew that if he kept plugging away, that eventually people would want to join this cause, and he was right.
Anything else?
I'm in awe of how amazingly articulate you are.
So am I.
Yes.
So while you're still mic'd up, is there anything that we haven't asked you that you'd like to say?
It would be redundant because I'd be hearkening back, John, to what I said about not being complacent.
Go ahead and talk
So-
about it again.
Yeah, talk
Okay.
about it one
It
time.
doesn't hurt.
We are really blessed that we have a lot of people who love the river, and it might be a formal organization like our friends at Friends of the Mississippi, but it might also be people I met at the public hearings last summer who just care about the river, or maybe they keep a houseboat someplace on the river. They know that this could slip away from us, that we could have unseemly, unfortunate things happen, and we have to be the people who are willing to speak up and say, no, no, I'm in this for my kids and my grandkids. I'm in this for the long haul. I don't care about the new tax revenue or whatever somebody's promised. No, no. If it's not appropriate for the river, and if it in any way interferes with people's access and use of the river, no, we're not going to do this.
I'm glad you said that again, because that was a good, that's gonna be, you know,